It was one of those quiet Sunday afternoons when the house was filled with the soft ticking of the old grandfather clock and the distant hum of the television in the background. I was sitting by the window, sipping coffee, gazing at the golden leaves dancing in the breeze. Autumn had arrived in full swing. Life had slowed down after my kids had grown up and moved on with their own lives. The house, once filled with laughter and chaos, now echoed with silence. That's when I got the call. It was my son, Jacob. His voice still had that youthful energy, even though he was now in his early 30s, married and settled. "Mom," he began, "do you remember those trips we used to take when I was a kid? Just the four of us. Me, Emily, Dad, and you." I smiled at the memory. Those road trips, the campfires, the shared stories in tents, it had been the heart of our family bonding. "Of course I do," I replied, warmth filling my chest. "Well," he paused. "I was thinking, what if we did that again? You know, go as a family. Just like in childhood." I was taken aback. It had been over a decade since we'd taken a trip together. Life had moved on. My husband, Richard, had retired and spent most of his days fishing or watching football. Emily lived across the country, busy with her teaching job and her 2 toddlers. But something about Jacob's voice made me pause. He sounded hopeful, nostalgic, even a little vulnerable. "Let's do it," I said before doubt could creep in. The following weeks were a whirlwind of planning. Jacob coordinated with Emily, who was surprisingly excited and promised to bring her boys along. Richard, though initially hesitant, grumbling about sleeping in tents at his age, eventually came around when he found out there would be a cabin with indoor plumbing. We chose a state park tucked away in the mountains of Colorado, not too far from where we used to go when the kids were small. It had lakes, hiking trails, and plenty of open sky. As we packed our bags and loaded the SUV, something shifted in the air. We weren't just going on a vacation. We were revisiting something sacred, a chapter we'd closed too soon. The day we arrived, the forest greeted us with cool air and the scent of pine. The cabin was modest but cozy. Wooden floors, a stone fireplace, and a porch that overlooked the lake. Jacob and his wife Hannah arrived shortly after, with their daughter Lily bouncing out of the car with excitement. Emily came in later that evening with her 2 boys, Jamie and Carter, both under 10 but already full of questions about bears and esmeraldas. The first night was filled with laughter and shared memories. We cooked over the fire pit, roasted marshmallows, and told the same old family stories. The time Jacob got lost for an hour in the woods and Emily bribed him to keep it a secret, or the time Richard forgot the tent poles and we had to sleep under the stars. The kids listened wide-eyed, giggling at stories of their parents' childhood mischief. As the days passed, something magical happened. Phones were left untouched, and everyone seemed more present. We hiked trails that led to breathtaking views. We played board games by lantern light. The kids built forts from fallen branches, just like Jacob and Emily used to. One morning, we woke to see a family of deer grazing just outside the cabin. It was like nature was welcoming us back to something we'd forgotten. But it wasn't just the beauty of the outdoors that made it special. It was the reconnection. Emily, usually reserved and always busy, took long walks with me, opening up about the struggles of motherhood and her longing for a sense of balance. Jacob and Richard spent hours fishing on the lake, sharing beers and quiet conversations. Even Hannah and I found ourselves bonding over cooking, swapping recipes and stories while the kids chased each other around the trees. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting an amber glow across the lake, Jacob sat beside me on the porch. "I'm glad we did this," he said, his voice soft. "Me too," I replied. "You were the one who made it happen." He looked out at the water, thoughtful. "I guess I missed it more than I realized. Life moves so fast, you know? But being here, it makes me remember who we are. Not just individually, but as a family." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "You reminded all of us." That night, we had a small celebration. Just us. No special reason, no big announcement. Just a fire, some music, and all of us under the stars. Emily played her old guitar, strumming tunes from our past. The kids danced around the fire. Richard laughed so hard at one of Jacob's jokes that he nearly fell off his chair. And I just sat there watching, soaking it all in. I realized then how precious these moments were. How quickly they could slip away if we didn't hold on to them. This trip wasn't about nostalgia. It was about reclaiming something vital. On our last morning, we gathered for one final hike. The trail was steep, but at the top was a clearing with a view that stretched for miles. We stood there, side by side, generations together. Lily held my hand, pointing out shapes in the clouds. Jamie asked if we could do this every year. Carter proudly held a walking stick he'd carved himself. Before we left, we took a group photo. No filters, no poses, just us. Smiling, arms around each other, the wind in our hair, the trees towering behind. When I looked at it later, I saw more than a picture. I saw love. I saw resilience. I saw a family that had weathered time, distance, and life, and found their way back. The drive home was quiet. The kids were asleep in the back. Emily followed behind in her car. Jacob drove, and I sat next to him, watching the scenery blur by. The mountains faded, replaced by highways and signs pointing us back to routine. But I wasn't sad. I was full. When we got home, the house didn't feel so empty anymore. It held the echo of laughter, the scent of pine still clinging to our jackets, and the promise of new memories to come. And every time I passed that framed photo on the mantel, the one from the mountain clearing, I smiled. All because my son suggested we go as a family, just like in childhood.